Oh, hello! Today we are here to wrap up my reading for the month of April, which I have to say was an interesting month. It was characterized, I would say, by both highs and lows. There are some things that I was really enjoying and really loving and I'm excited to tell you guys about, and then there were some things that were not great. It is rare for me to have two less than 2-star books that I finished in one month, but we have that. And we also have a notable DNF. So we definitely have some like spicy takes, which makes sense considering literally one of the vlogs I made in April was called my hot takes vlog or polarizing books vlog. So anyway, without further ado, we will start with my stats and challenges, and then we will go to my disappointments, my surprises, and my hits for the month. So let's dive in. Okay, so in terms of the number of books I read 26 books this month, 20 of which I owned, 6 of which I did not. I will say that that feels like a lot more than I read just because I read a lot of like short sci-fi romance things, but you know, technically 26 books, read a total of 8,048 pages, and the average book length was 310 pages. The average age of book I read was 13 years, and the average amount of time it had been on my TBR was 1 year. I paid for 46% of the books that I read, and the average amount I paid for them was $4.86. Genre-wise, two biggest genres were fantasy and mystery. Now I should say a couple of those fantasies I think are basically horror-ish. I know at least one of those fantasies is a version of horror. I do struggle with where to put horror in my stats because I tend to kind of go on like, is it supernatural horror? In which case I usually put it with fantasy. Or if it's like a science-y speculative horror, I'll put it with sci-fi. Or if it's more sort of thriller based, I put it with mystery. So it just, anyway, side note. I always struggle with where horror should go in these stats. But anyway, fantasy, mystery, definitely my two biggest genres. Oh wait, I lied, sorry. Speculative romance technically was the biggest one. So speculative romance, fantasy and mystery, and then a melange of everything else. A couple of general fiction, a classic, no nonfiction this month, which I've been reading a lot of that recently, so I maybe just got a little fizzled out on that. But yeah, pretty typical mix for me. And then as I was alluding to in the intro, very hit or miss for me this month, very much highs and lows. I had several very low rated things, but then I had a lot of 4 stars, a lot of 3.5 stars, and a 4.5. So kind of a little bit of a mixed bag. In terms of challenges that I will not be talking about in a different category, for book club I did read A Lady's Guide to Mischief and Mayhem by Amanda Collins. This was for Blades and Bodice Ripper Book Club, and you can find that book club over on Amanda's channel, The Naughty Librarian. I'll try to remember to link that. I think we all, well, Leanna hated this. The rest of us liked it, thought it was fun, but not very memorable. I would land at about 3 stars. So yeah, pleasant enough, but not super memorable. And then the only arc I want to mention that I haven't already talked about in my mid-month check-in, or that I'm not going to mention in a different category, is Breathless by Amy McCulloch. Now, this is one that I was excited about because I thought it was going to be, you know, sort of isolated closed circle mystery set on a mountain, somebody dies, we're all trapped with whoever did it, mystery ensues. I would say that that is roughly the setup for this. Oh, by the way, I should mention, if you see my nails changing colors, it's because it's thermal, so it gets orange when it's cold. Anyway, side note. That is pretty much the setup. That is, I would say, an accurate description of the book, is that they're doing this climb in the Himalayas and, you know, people start dying. But I would say that this reads a lot more like an adventure thriller than a isolated whodunit. In fact, my main problem with this book is that it is glaringly obvious whodunit. Like literally the second the killer was introduced, I was like, oh, I bet they are the killer. So I think in terms of it being a mystery, maybe not so much, but I did really love the atmosphere. Like, I think she did a fantastic job at putting you on the mountain. She, I think, got inspired to write this when she was hiking this mountain. So she's clearly done this before. I thought the atmosphere and sort of the setting was really a standout. And I thought that, especially because once you get to these higher altitudes, there's like oxygen deprivation, which then starts messing with people's minds. So I thought that that added an interesting element. I honestly wish she'd used that even more. more. I liked mostly the characters. I did like our main character in particular. She is a journalist who kind of made her name by writing about how she keeps failing to climb these mountains. And so she gets invited on the trip by this world famous climber guy, and he's like, hey, I'll give you this interview that you've been wanting, but only if you can actually finish the hike. So it's sort of like a professional challenge for her. She is biracial, so she experiences like some microaggressions, and kind of like she has this Asian last name, but she is very white presenting, so kind of her awareness of how she's tokenized in her workplace. So there was some stuff there that I thought was interesting. I think that there were good moments, and I thought that this was very page-turnery. I enjoyed my time with it. I was between a 3.5 and a 4, and for an arc I always defer to a higher rating, so I would end at a 4. I would say if you're looking for like a super mysterious mystery or a thriller that is based in a mystery, I would say that that is not the biggest component or the most successful component of this book. But if you're okay with that and you like the idea of an adventure story, and it is an isolation thriller, so there's that as well. You like the interesting setting in a different country, in a different culture, I think this is totally worth seeking out. I think I saw that this got picked as a Book of the Month Club pick, so there you go there. And yeah, all in all, I thought this was fun, not my all-time favorite, and not, I would say, super memorable, but pretty enjoyable, so I would recommend. Okay, so now let's transition to our disappointments first. Now, several of these you've already seen me talk about. So we'll start at the most disappointing and work our way up to the one that I actually liked, but I'm sad because it could have been amazing and it's just not quite that. But the two you've already heard about. Okay, these were both in my polarizing vlog, my hot takes vlog. The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. I DNF'd this because I could not get through it. I just do not like the writing at all, and found it very overwritten, very melodramatic, and very just not my taste in terms of the writing. And for that reason, you know, I had that problem with this one too, but this was to the extent that I just couldn't bring myself to read it. Anytime it's taking me hours and hours to get through the first 100 pages, is a pretty good indication that I should just DNF it, because I'm not getting into the story, I'm not clicking with the writing, and that was my experience of this. I think that this is a pretty polarizing book. Some people really love it, some people just hate it. I wouldn't say that I hated it, I would say that this was just not for me, and I really struggled with the writing. So that is why I DNF'd it, and definitionally then it would, I guess, be the worst book. But I gave out actually 2 1.5 stars. And I should mention, it is very rare for me to give just a straight up 1. A straight up 1 means I thought it was both so bad and or I was like offended by it in some way. And I don't feel like I can quite say that about either of these 1.5 stars, but I did just like, they were worse to me than a 2, which to me a 2 is like a C. A 1.5 is like a D. You didn't quite fail, but like I actively did not have a good time. And I would say that about the Maidens. There was a little brief glimmer, kind of like here-ish, where I was in the swing of the mystery and I was having an okay time, but I just found this to be this did not come together for me. Every chapter ended on a cliffhanger that wasn't really a cliffhanger. The characters' motivations made no sense. I think I could have gotten a lot more on board with this if I felt like the character work, if the math mathed, and I did not feel like it did. I didn't think that it made sense that she would be getting this involved. I thought that the reveal when it happened was a fine reveal, but had no setup, so it didn't feel very satisfying. And again, I struggled a lot with the writing, which is a theme. It's, how to say this? I'm pretty forgiving on writing if the author isn't going for something, right? So like, if it's just meant to be sort of workman prose, if it's not beautiful, or if there's some clunkers in there, I'm more or less willing to let it go. Clear he was going for something, and in my mind, I don't think he reached it. So, for my money, this was not enjoyable. I did not like this. Okay, thanks, bye. And oh, I just realized both of my 1.5s were Book of the Month Club picks, so there you go. Hey, they pick a lot of books. Some you're gonna like, some you're not going to. But I picked this one up, The Cartographer, is on kind of a whim. This is by Ping Shepherd. And I picked it up because it sounded like a book that was really up my alley. I'm trying to remember exactly what hooked me in. Yeah, it's set in the New York Public Library. Somebody's found dead and there's like a map. And it was like, oh, okay, this sounds sort of like a conspiracy thriller, a conspiracy mystery. This will be fun. I found, so like, let's compare this to Dan Brown. I think I've read a few Dan Browns, and I've given most of them 3.5 or 4 stars because I think they do a good job of what they're supposed to do. You're not supposed to think that much about it. You're not supposed to really apply a lot of like critical thinking. You're just supposed to have a great time. And I'm down for that. If that's what the book is supposed to be doing, then I'm good. So if that had been what this book was, like it was nonsense but fun, I would have gotten in the swing of it. It's a cool premise. It is sort of a conspiracy type situation. There's an estrangement between our main character and her father, who is like a famous cartographer. Though I will say Leanna was very annoyed by the use of the word cartographer. She happened to read this month too. I kind of went with it, but she is technically right. Like they're really more map archivists, like specialized archivists. Neither here nor there in my opinion, but just FYI, they are not technically cartographers. Okay, anyway, her dad is famous. They have this big falling out and she goes her separate way and she's like stuck making these reproduction maps that she's mad about, but also like kind of fuck you, like the whole authenticity thing around this. Okay, whatever. So then he dies and she comes and she realizes that he has in his possession the map that caused them to have their falling out in the first place, so then she's got questions about it. So like that is a cool setup. People are dying, somebody wants this map, why do they want this random map that is kind of obscure and like not of a big important thing? Like why is this such a big thing? It's a cool setup, but it's so boring. Like that's a cool setup, but the actual book is so boring. And because it's so boring, it forces me to sit here and think about the things that do not make sense in this book. Like the motivation of her father, of why they have the falling out, on its face, when you first got introduced, I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Or like, I kind of hate her dad. Like, this is kind of inexcusable. I can't believe you would do this to your child, who you ostensibly had a good relationship with. Like, this makes no sense. So I was like, okay, there's gonna have to be some sort of big payoff that's gonna make me feel okay about that decision. Well, when you find out why, it's worse. I hate him even more. Everybody in here makes dumb decisions. There's such a big plot hole, and I'm not gonna get into spoilers, but like the plot hole, you could drive an 18-wheeler through this plot hole. It is such a glaring one that, again, if I were having fun and if this was just like fun conspiracy thriller, I wouldn't care. I would just be rolling with it. I'd be like, that is dumb. I don't care. This is fun. It is not fun, and therefore I have to sit here and think about how your world building makes no sense. So it's not terribly written in the sense of the writing did not bother me. There's some interesting moments with different characters, and the premise itself is really cool. For that reason, I'm not gonna give it a 1 star because like, is there something in this that's redeeming? Yes. I was not like actively offended by this. I just am mad because this should have been great because it's such a cool idea and it is both boring and stupid, which is just very offensive to me. So for that reason, I gave it a 1.5 star, and you'll see this again in a vlog eventually, but this was not it. Okay, and then my last disappointment, I want to be so clear before I even tell you what this book is. I want to be so clear that I liked this book. I gave it 3.5 stars, which is a B+ for me. I liked this book. However, I am putting it as a disappointment because it had the ingredients to be a 4.5 or a 5 star. And the fact that this book does not have enough focus in its characters, there are far too many characters, and it doesn't spend enough time on the part of the super cool premise that make it cool. Like, I wish that it had just spent more time on that part. That is why I didn't give it a 4.5 or a 5, and that is why I'm calling this a disappointment, because it could have been a favorite of the year or an all-time favorite. Okay, so the book I'm talking about is Hide by Kiersten White. This is fun. This is a fun book. I recommend it. I think it's a cool premise. Basically, the setup is all these people are coming to be in this contest where they can win $50,000, and it's basically a souped up game of hide and seek in this creepy ass abandoned amusement park. What a cool idea, right? So that is cool. I actually really like our main character. She is experiencing homelessness, so I thought that that piece was nice. We also have another main-ish character who, a queer, I'm not sure if she's a lesbian or bi or whatever, but she's a queer, I think she's Black. She's definitely not white, veteran, who has a disability from her time in the army. I really liked her. There's this guy who got kicked out of his cult family who's cool. I liked him. His name was Legrand. Like I liked our kind of main characters, but the problem is that there are 14 people included in this game of hide and seek. And it lasts 7 days and 2 people are eliminated every day. But because there's so many people, you can't really spend time with them. And the approach to the actual hiding and seeking is that you don't spend enough time. Like, I wanted there to be more like cat and mouse, like near misses, or like this person does like I wanted more of that. So I'm sad that that didn't happen. Now, the actual solution, or like what is really going on, I think will be polarizing for some people. I don't know that it was as well executed as I would have liked, but I really like the idea of it, and I kind of just went with it. The book had bought me, a great example, in contrast to the cartographers, the book had bought me in enough at that point that I was into it, and also we get a point of view from Linda, who is like in charge of the hide and seek, and I really liked her point of view. So I liked that, but I think some people won't. Anyway, all that to say, I'm hoping I'm being so clear about this. I'm only putting this as a disappointment because I think this could have been fantastic. And instead I would say it's really strong, really good, would recommend. I think it's really fun. I think if you're going on vacation this summer, this would be a great, like, easy breezy book to read on the plane kind of thing. It's a fun book, just not as great as I had hoped it might be. Okay, let's segue into surprises. And I guess on the note of a book that is rated higher than you might expect for the category, my 4.5 star of the month I decided to put in the surprise category, and that is S by really Doug Dorst, but J.J. Abrams as well. So, I have a whole vlog about this, and I don't really know how to summarize my thoughts very well still. This is an experience. I would say as a book, it's like 3.5 to 4, but it's basically like a puzzle in book form. It has like little bits in the pages, like it has like maps and memos and notes, and it's got all these different annotations in the margin. It's a whole experience. There are blogs, there's entire blogs dedicated to helping you figure out everything that's going on in this. I have only scratched the surface, but as an experience, it's a 4.5 because it was so fun. It was just different than anything I've done. Definitely in terms of a reading experience, it was different than anything I've experienced before, but also just, yeah, it was basically like having a book-based puzzle. The actual story, The Ship of Theseus, this story is like a 3.5 and a 4. I didn't love the actual book within the book, but everything around it I loved. And I think that this is something I'm gonna keep in my living room, and like whenever I'm just, you know, wanting a little brain puzzle, I'll open it up and try to figure out what the heck is going on that page. So I call this a surprise because I didn't really know what I was getting into going into it, and whatever expectations I had were still not met. They were just surprised. So 4.5, but a surprise. And then the rest of these surprises are all 3.5 stars. So maybe we'll start with one I don't have in physical form, The Agathas by Kathleen Glasgow and Liz someone, I think. This one just surprised me because it's a YA thriller that is supposed to be based on Agatha Christie, and I guess I had imagined the based on Agatha Christie being more specifically like a retelling, or I don't know. I guess I frankly was wondering if it would actually be incorporating Agatha Christie in it meaningfully at all, and I think it did. The part that particularly surprised me was the tone, which is very sort of, I don't know, maybe like Riverdale, Scooby-Doo, teen sleuthy is the vibe, which I like. I thought that that was really fun. And then also the fact that one of our main characters has a backstory based on an incident in Agatha Christie's life. I thought that was cool. So anyway, that one kind of surprised me. You can see more about that in my Factor Cap, Is It Like Agatha Christie vlog, for which I also read The Monogram Murders by Sophie Hannah, which is an actual like Poirot fan fiction that was commissioned by the Agatha Christie estate and literally has her name right here on the tin. I would say I was surprised because I did end up having a really good time in this, despite the fact that I don't think it meaningfully feels like an Agatha Christie book. It has her character, it has the kind of setting she would have, but I don't know that it really felt like a Christie mystery. That said, I still had a really good time, and I was not sure if I would be able to do that. It turns out I could, so I was glad I got to enjoy this, and I'll try a couple more of these. So that is also in that vlog. And then The Yellow Papers and Other Stories by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I didn't really know what to expect with this. I'm reading this, say it with me, for a vlog that you guys have not seen yet, but I enjoyed this one. I thought that it was interesting, more as an artifact of history than as a story. So the titular Yellow Wallpaper, I didn't read in my education, which I think a lot of people do, but it's sort of a classic, I knew it was sort of a classic horror type short story, which it is, but it wasn't in the way that I was expecting, so that surprised me. And then overall, I would say that there were highs and lows in the collection, but it's very feminist and it's very much a product of its time. So I think that I'm surprised that what I most enjoy about this is essentially this as a primary source document of this time period vis-a-vis gender roles and expression in the US. So I enjoyed this, but not for the reasons that I thought that I might. And I was surprised at the kind of horror that the title story ended up being. Sorry, I have no idea what I was saying, so I think I'm just gonna start over for my hits because my battery died and I just don't remember. So I barely started, we'll just get into it. But moving into my hits, all of these were 4 stars. I really enjoyed all of them, obviously. They are hits. Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy. Me and Leanna have been buddy reading these, and we started with another buddy read this month, which was The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, which I talked about in my mid-month check-in. I do think that if you were able to read that novella, I guess, before you get to this one, I would recommend it. I think it helps you understand the geopolitical situation. It also, I think I mentioned in my mid-month check-in, could be a good place to just try Hobb and get a sense of what she does. This is really good. It's the, I think, would I say this? I don't know if I would say for sure, but I think it's one of the stronger of the 3 beginnings of trilogies I've read. I'd say this is probably the second strongest. I really liked seeing Fitz later and more mature in his life. He has had a lot of time to himself to lick his wounds, to grow. He has an adoptive son. Night Eyes is still with him. Oh, God, Night Eyes. And that's lovely. And then I really love the pun here because the Fool comes back to task Fitz with something that he needs to do for the heir apparent who has gone missing, who is technically, well, I don't want to spoil earlier books, but anyway, it's hard to say much about this because it's so built on the earlier books. This is the first book in the 3rd trilogy, which makes this the 7th book overall, /8th if you count the Willful Princess novella, and so it's kind of hard to tell you about this. I will say I really enjoyed this. I think I may have had slightly too high of expectations for it because people talk about like, oh my god, if you loved the Live Ship Traders trilogy, you're just gonna have your socks blown off by Tawny Man. And while I did definitely really enjoy this, I wonder if I was expecting this to be like a 5-star, and it wasn't quite, but I still think it's really good. It's one of my favorites that I've read of those 7 books. And I really, like I said, I liked catching up with Fitz. I actually really enjoyed the kind of slow burn of this. And then I think when we actually got to action, very interesting. I think we have an interesting sort of tableau that the next 2 books can build off of. You know, she trifles with my feelings in every one of these books. So did I weep? Yes. Was it at the thing that those of you who've read this book are thinking about towards the end? Yes. And yeah, so part of the magic in this world is that you can, well, it's like a marginalized magic system called the Wit, which allows you to sort of psychically bond with an animal, and you can talk to them, and you can actually talk to other witted animals even if you don't have that bond. And Fitz is talking to a cat for the first time, and I am obsessed with this cat. Like, that was my favorite part probably of the whole book, was him talking to this cat. But oh, the Fool continues to be an icon and a legend. It's so good. I will say something, I mean, I mentioned this in earlier books, like sexual assault is always something I would tell you to watch out for in these books. Any of the Fitz books, because there is that animal magic, there's always the potential for animal cruelty. So if that is something that you can't deal with, I would put that on your radar as something that is a part of most of these books. So anyway, continue to enjoy this one. We've got a month off, and then in June, we'll read the 2nd book. So excited to keep going. And then one that I currently have at a 4, I could see this if I end up thinking about it more over time, becoming a 4.5 or a 5, is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Listen, could this be more of a Mara book? I don't think it could. It is so postmodern. It's very meta. I mean, literally one of the characters is Jorge of Borges. So like Jorge Luis Borges. Like, I love that. It is a mystery. It is a mystery, but I wouldn't say that it reads like a mystery, but it is certainly a mystery plot. And then literally the whole book is about like philosophy and Christian church history in the 14th century. I mean, I when I was a TA, that was what I taught, was church history. So like, I was like, oh, the Benedictines and the Franciscans, and we're in this controversy, and we have the Avignon papacy, and oh, ooh, like, I mean, I was just so excited. We've got all kinds of like nominalism stuff, William of Ockham, and also our main character is William of Baskerville, clearly a reference to Arthur Conan Doyle, and our main characters, William, and then his kind of Watson character is Adso, so we have that dynamic. It's set in this like really opulent abbey, so it's a cool and evocative setting. I just like, this is so for me. I do think that it kind of goes a little all over the place. So I get if I'm actually shocked that this is as much of a bestseller as it is. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, because I'm surprised people like this as much as I like it. Because there's a lot that's just like in Latin, in German, in like whatever, and it doesn't get translated. It has no problem going on like a philosophical aside about the morality or theology of humor. I'm just surprised that people like this as much as they do. I mean, this is one of the best-selling novels of all time, if I'm remembering rightly. So anyway, I really enjoyed this. It gave me a lot to think about. It was definitely up my alley. And like I said, if I continue to mull on it, I could see this becoming a 4.5 or a 5 over time, because it was very much my gig. I guess segueing to another book that has a Sherlock Watson riff on it at the center of it. And really this is like a short story, but it's a standalone, so I get a book, novella, short story, I don't know. The Tea Master and the Detective by, oh gosh, who is it? Aliette de Bodard. I'd had this recommended to me before, reading it for a vlog, so you'll see more of my thoughts there, but the TLDR is that I just love this. I think that if the plot had actually come together better, this easily could have been a 4.5 or a 5, but the actual mystery plot, I think, is not very satisfactory in the way that it progresses. But I love the characters and I love the world. I should definitely read more from her in this series, because there are these like mind ships, and there's like these ships that have a human consciousness in the core of them, but they're spaceships. I don't know. It was so interesting. And then she's a tea master because this mind ship, or she, I guess they, I don't know. The soldier's child, I think was its name, their name, like is specializing in these drugging teas, and the shipmind is sort of the Watson figure. They were scarred in a war, very Watson. And then the tea master, she is a professor turned consulting detective who comes to the shipmind for a special brew because she spends her life pretty drugged up, a la Sherlock Holmes, and then things progress from there. Anyway, I love the vibes of this one so much. I could see other people not loving this as much as I did, but I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was super fun, super satisfying. I was into it. And then my last hit, I guess I'll talk to you about. It's funny to me that this is the one I'm ending on, because it's not necessarily my favorite of these, but anyway, whatever. I'm a study in contrast. We're going from The Name of the Rose to The Half-Orc's Maiden Bride by Ruby Dixon. Look, you guys know, I love Ruby Dixon. She is, in this house we stand Ruby Dixon. I absolutely love her. I love her humor. She's so campy and yet still a romance that I can get on board with and believe in. And I have seen her recommending, I think the author is Finn Finley, I forget, but the author who's been writing all of those orc romances that have been blowing up on Kindle Unlimited, Ruby Dixon has recommended those. I tried and just couldn't get into them, but Ruby Dixon has finally written an orc romance that I can deal with, because somehow this orc is still a himbo who is very sweet and also, you know, still has some of the orcishness, but because he is the titular half-orc, he, you know, has some more human conventions or characteristics. This is in the same world as her Anchor and Aspect series. And so we have a reference to the first novella in that series, which is The King's Spinster Bride, which is one of the places I tell people to start with Ruby Dixon, because I feel like it's you get the camp and the smut, but it's, I don't know. I feel like there's more for people to get on board with in that novella. So it has the same ceremony that is in that novella, which is very sweet. And part of what I really liked about this was that it was sweet, that it's an orc romance that is erotic, but it's still very sweet, which is what Ruby Dixon does. So it's campy, it's sweet, it's smutty, it's what I want. And I really liked that, so it's the Maiden bride is the other part of the title. She's sort of like the discarded daughter of the family because she's so tall that all these insecure short kings don't want her. So she's very sheltered. She considers herself very unlovable or unattractive, but she is plenty attractive. She's just tall, and she's, perfectly normal looking. She's just tall. So, this gigantic orc is like, that's not a problem for me. And he really gives her space to explore her sensuality because she's so sheltered. Like, she doesn't really understand what sex is fully. And so, like, he gives her a lot of space to explore that. And it's just very sweet. I liked it. It was short and it was fun. And God bless Ruby Dixon. Last month she had a miss for me with the last book in her Fireblood series, but this one definitely worked better. And I think this month we're getting something in the Ice Home series. I'm hoping. I don't know. We'll get another one this month, so I'll be here for whatever that is. Whatever she puts out, I will read. And with that, I think that will do it for April. Definitely let me know how your April reading went, what you thought of any of the books that I talked about, etc. And yeah, I hope you guys are looking forward to May. I think this is going up on May 4th, so May the 4th be with you. And yeah, that will do it for me. So if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below, and I think that will do it. I hope you're having an absolutely lovely day today, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!